All right, Pop, can you hear me?
I can. I can.
Perfect.
You can see me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you. We are struggling with Zoom a little bit, but we wanted to do a quick call or a quick Zoom video to talk about the vaccine. And the person we have on the other side of the screen is Clay, who is my oldest son. So for full disclosure, but I'll let him talk about his position, but he's got a lot of research related to the vaccine that we want to share. So we'll just kind of jump right in. You ready, Clay?
Yes.
Okay. So can you give us, just tell me what your title is and your position and where you're located.
Yeah. So, hi, everybody. My name is Clay Small. I am currently an adult ICU clinical pharmacist at University Hospital down in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. How many COVID patients have you been treating since you've been down there?
So, I was involved in kind of the earliest surges back in early 2020. And at that time, we were filling up a 35-bed COVID ICU as early as, late February. And so, just a rough ballpark estimate, we probably have seen anywhere into like the 10,000 of patients at University Hospital that I have been either involved with or have peripherally rounded with from a research perspective.
Wow. And that's quite a few. So the hospital that you're at, is it a university hospital? What level trauma center is that?
So it's a level one trauma center and it's also an academic medical center that's associated with the University of Texas at Austin.
Okay. Okay. How many ICU beds in total do you guys have?
So we have four different designated ICUs that have 35 beds. We have also allocated separate beds for surge patients who have been allocated in areas that have not usually been designated ICU. So we have 140 designated ICU beds, but we have definitely used a larger number of beds because of the surge.
Okay. Have you been, well, thank you for sharing all that. Have you been vaccinated yet?
I did. I got vaccinated with my second dose last Tuesday.
So you've been through both doses. Which vaccine did you have? Did you have Moderna or did you have the Pfizer?
I had the Pfizer vaccine.
Okay. Okay. Did you have any reservations surrounding getting your shot?
I didn't really have too many reservations around getting the second shot. I had kind of really tried to do my due diligence about reading the vaccine as much as I could to get a good understanding for when talking to patients about what to expect with this. And, I kind of felt comfortable based off of what I had read and kind of what I had seen with these patients and trying to make sure that, that we're in the right spot. And I felt very comfortable.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So we have asked everyone in all of our buildings to put together a list of questions. And there's a lot of anxiety associated with the vaccine, and
Sure.
hopefully help shed some light. So I'm going to start some of the questions that came from, this is from all of our buildings. So the first one I have is, a lot of staff are concerned about getting this vaccine that is so soon in the development of the vaccine. Can you not enough research? Can you give me some insight to that?
Yeah, so that was definitely something I've heard very frequently. And when you see that time frame originally compared to what our earliest previous vaccine, which was the mumps vaccine, that took 4 years. So I get the concern. One of the biggest things that I would remark about this vaccine process is because of how unique it was and how different it was from other vaccine processes. A lot of other vaccines, we're kind of starting from ground zero. We don't have any kind of information, but coronavirus has been around for 500 years. This is just a different substrain of that virus. We've had previous vaccines that have looked into previous variants, such as the MERS and the SARS infections that were out in the Middle East and Asia previously. So we already had a rough template for COVID before this even process got started, which really helped with developing this process. Also, one of the biggest problems with developing a vaccine is getting a good kind of thought process about what kind of viral genome we're working with. And one of the greatest things about modern science is that we were able to discover the entire viral genome of this infection back in January of 2020, which is way earlier than we have been able for any of our other infections that we previously have dealt with. One of the other bigger things that has been kind of remarked on is how quickly we move through different phases of the trial. And now what I would say is that the number of patients that were included in these trials for COVID has far surpassed what we've used in previous vaccine trials. Typically, to go past phase 3 trials, you need 3,000 patients. For the Pfizer vaccine alone, we had 43,000 patients who were in that trial. So it's a significant larger number of patients that we're able to look at from a safety standpoint and from an efficacy standpoint. So a lot of those factors kind of played into why this process moved so quickly. And then also the last thing is the unprecedented amount of resources that were dedicated to this vaccine. When you're looking at previous processes, we haven't really had the same number of funding or really the same amount of support and information sharing as we did with COVID. Time was of the essence with this, and really what happened is a global community, the health workers across the world really stepped up and kind of really were able to share information that we haven't done previously. So when you mix in how quickly we were able to find out what the actual sequence of this virus was, how much funding was, and how many patients there were in the trials, it really expedited that entire process compared to what we've seen historically.
Okay. Wow, that's very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. There are two vaccines that are out there right now. One is Moderna and one is Pfizer. Can you kind of give us an idea what the difference is? I know they both are a two-stage process, but what's the difference in the timing of getting the Pfizer as opposed to Moderna? And then could you also tell us what the effectiveness of those vaccines are?
Yeah, of course. So there are two different mRNA vaccines that are currently out right now, with another one from Johnson & Johnson that is in phase 3 trials that may be a one-shot vaccine trial. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on as that continues to progress. But the biggest differences between Moderna and Pfizer are going to be some of the inactive ingredients. Obviously, when you have different patents, you can't have the exact same recipe that you have for the vaccine. So some of it is due to storage, and some of it's due to how you're going to be administering the vaccine. And some of the portions that come into the schedule that's going to be required that's different for them. But also there's a three-time difference in the amount of the actual genetic material between the two vaccines. And so with Pfizer, it only has 30 micrograms of the vaccine material, whereas Moderna has 100. And so that's part of the process of why there's a difference in the schedule as of right now. However, there hasn't been a significant difference in efficacy between the two. The last reported efficacy marker was at 95% for the Pfizer vaccine, with the Moderna being at 94.1%. So they're very equivalent, and there's not a significant difference between the efficacy of getting either vaccine.
Okay, so you have to help me here, but can you just tell me what efficacy is, please? Because I want to make sure I so.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry. So it's essentially how well it works. So it's going to be looking at, and what these vaccines specifically are looking at is how well they are at preventing you from having those severe symptoms. It doesn't necessarily look at if you are not able to transmit the virus to other people. That's one good thing to keep in mind. They specifically looked at in these trials, looking at symptoms developing for these patients. And so essentially when Pfizer says they have a 95% efficacy rate, it means that 95% of the patients that received the vaccine did not have any symptoms that developed that they were looking for.
Okay, could you still test positive for COVID even though you've had the vaccine?
So this vaccine is very uniquely different from other ones. So this is looking at specifically genetic material, which is called the mRNA, which is a component of how you develop the overall DNA within the nucleus of your cells. And what this is specifically looking to code for is a spike protein that's on the outer shell of COVID. So typically in the past, what we've done is we've given you the actual virus, or we've given the virus that's dead to you to kind of help your body to recognize what's coming in. This is very different to where this actually gives you the blueprint to how to identify COVID, because it only has this spike protein. So essentially, like we usually have been giving you the wanted poster of the patient is what we've been giving historically. Now we just said, hey, this guy always wears this hat. And so we're going to let you figure out this hat, that this guy is always going to come in, and you need to attack it when it comes in. So when you are given the vaccine, you're actually given the blueprint of how to fight, instead of actually giving you, hey, we fought this guy before. It's not like, hey, we've already got the plans how to fight this guy.
So it's very specific in what the vaccine is and how it treats it. So it's your body doesn't have to adapt. You're giving the body the road work, or the roadmap, excuse me, to get that completed. Okay, no, that's
Exactly.
very. So after we get the vaccine, do we still have to wear a mask?
And so this is one of the bigger things that the CDC continues to recommend is that typically to gain immunity from the vaccine, it's going to take 14 days at the soonest to help to identify that you have immunity to this specific COVID strain. Now, the biggest part of the question that we have is how long do you have immunity for? There are currently ongoing trials that look at, when do we need to get a booster? Do we need a booster or anything like that? And then there's a question also, since this is really what the trials are looking at was preventing symptoms, it doesn't necessarily rule out patients who are asymptomatic carriers. And so the biggest part that we still need to be vigilant of is that although that we will not develop the symptoms, we could still have the virus within us that we could transmit to other people. So for the immediate future, I would still recommend to wear masks only because of the patient population we're working with, and then also because of those who are either too sick at the time to get the vaccine or those who are too young. Those patients are still at risk of being transmitted to that could still get infected that we still need to be vigilant of and still follow this CDC guidelines of wearing a mask.
Okay. Now, if I've had COVID, if I have had COVID, should I wait to get the vaccine or should I get it immediately, or how does that work? Because I know that if I've had COVID and I've come through it, that I have antibodies. So how does that work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So one of the things that we're continuing to look at as well is ultimately there have been some reinfections of COVID. It's very, very rare, but there have been reports of it. And so one of the things we're continuing to look at is looking at the mutations that happen with this virus and where they're mutating at. The most recent new strains that have been found in the United Kingdom that have come here still have that spike protein. So we're still covered from that perspective. However, we still don't know some of the things about COVID that we're still learning that would need us to be kind of continue to follow up with. And so even though you've had COVID previously, I would still recommend getting a vaccine unless you've been infected within the previous 90 days. That's what's been found when those reinfection rates, none of them were reinfected within 90 days. And those patients were able to have natural immunity for that long. And so although we have antibodies to COVID, we don't know how long those antibodies last because our natural immunity seems to be something that is very different with this vaccine than it is with some of the other ones that we had previously studied. But we're very hopeful that we can be able to identify a good time frame by the middle of this year to get a good idea of when or if we would need a booster. So that's a good thing to keep an eye on as well.
Okay. Are there any allergies that you know of that should prevent someone from getting vaccinated?
So allergic reactions have been reported very rarely. And the one thing that has been documented to try to avoid is if you have an allergy to polyethylene glycol or polysorbate. Either of those two, you should avoid getting the COVID-19 vaccine as of right now, just because of the likelihood for an allergic reaction. But otherwise, for the most part, there haven't been a general trend of other ingredients with really any kind of allergic reactions that have been reported to this point.
Okay. So you said you've been vaccinated. Have you had both vaccinations?
Yes, I had both shots.
Did you have any side effects or what? So what were your side effects, and then what are the side effects we can expect when we get it?
Yeah, so I had some of the most frequently documented side effects. I had a headache probably the night of. I got it like early in the morning on the day I got my second shot. The first shot, I was really fine. Like I didn't really notice any kind of side effects or anything like that. Most of the side effects have been documented with the second shot. Because you're getting a second inoculation of the same thing that your body saw before. So your body's like, oh crap, we're not supposed to like this guy. And so it starts to exaggerate your immune response. And so the biggest things that you can be documented are fever or feverish like symptoms, some mild like muscle aches and headaches are the biggest things that have been documented. Just overall feeling kind of under the weather. I can say that I felt a little feverish the night of I got my second dose, but as the next day rolled around, I felt pretty fine. I felt a little bit tired, but for the most part, what can I attribute that to? You can't really necessarily say it's from the vaccine. It could be multiple different things. So I definitely say we're more alert of the side effects when we get the second shot, and most of them are going to be things that you kind of can deal with by taking like Tylenol or like ibuprofen, such things like the fever and the headache are the most commonly cited side effects.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. And then I guess if I get the vaccine and I have some adverse side effects, do you know how that reporting goes, or how does that reporting work for you since you've been through both sessions of it?
So the way you can report side effects is that if you go through the vaccine adverse event reporting system, it's VAERS, and it's an online, you just type that into Google and it'll be the very first thing that pops up. And there's an online form to submit to the FDA and CDC to document that side effect. And they'll keep that in an online database, and we'll be reporting like the frequency of some of these side effects based off of that reporting. And typically the reporting system is used for less frequent side effects or unanticipated side effects. But you can feel free to document the most frequently cited one as well, because that will provide good data to the ultimately when we're coming out with some of the, like the overall frequency studies and reported to the public.
Okay. Okay. Now, did you have to pay anything for your vaccine, Clay?
I did not. It was something that was ultimately covered by the health system.
Okay. And so I didn't think you had, because everything that we read, everything we've been told is that it's free, and there's no cost to it. I do know they collected some insurance information so they can do some tracking, but I'm not aware of any cost to it. I just want to make sure your system is ours, and I wanted to make sure. Yeah. Those are the majority of our questions. There's a lot of concerns with staff as to whether this is going to be mandated, and currently we are not mandating this shot. Is your hospital system mandating it?
We have an official opt-out process, but there has been a very strong education campaign to kind of work with people to ultimately kind of find out where our struggles are with individuals who aren't comfortable with getting the vaccine, and then we kind of try and work through it. It's not mandatory at our hospital, but I haven't encountered too many people who haven't got it to get a good idea of what happens when, that process, what happens necessarily for nurses who are working with COVID positive patients in the ICU. I don't know necessarily what the process would be if they were to refuse, but it's not mandatory. Right.
Okay. So as we sit here today, and it is in late January, Assurance is not going to require that shot either. I just want to make sure, kind of trying to make sure we're keeping in line with other health systems. We've spoken to the large in our area, and they've basically given us the same kind of answer as what you've given. Okay, so that's the majority of our questions. Clay, is there anything else you want to kind of share just in general? So, I know that your family members are obviously very concerned. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Can you kind of give us some guidance as to maybe how to ignore some of that, or maybe where a good resource that you find other than the CDC to go to where we can get information?
No, yeah, I think first off, I think this is something that's new for all of us, and I would be lying to say that I have all the answers or the healthcare community in general has all the answers. I think, we're learning with you, and we're trying to get information out there as quickly as we can with trying to be as accurate as possible as well. So it's been a very unique process with trying to deal with a virus we've never seen before. And what I would say is that some of the concerns around the virus, I think, are valid. And I think what I see with a lot of other things is kind of a very good case study for what happens when we're very, very afraid and when we're very outside of our comfort zone. One of the things that I've read is that there is a concern that this vaccine changes the DNA, your DNA. And I just want to say that, this vaccine is mRNA that doesn't even get into the nucleus of your cells where your DNA lives. This stays out in what's called the cytoplasm of the cell and actually never touches your genetic code necessarily. So I know there are people worried about, having some underlying, autoimmune diseases be all of a sudden become more common because of alterations in our genetic code. And I just want to say that, you know, based off of how this works, that doesn't necessarily happen.
Has there been anything related, Clay, to you know, the long-term effects of the vaccine as to, I mean, I know we're still looking at what the long-term effects of the virus are that, you know, we're still learning, but is there anything that you've heard so far, what the concerns are for long-term effects from getting vaccinated?
Yeah, so that's a very good question too. So that's one of the things that we're ongoing monitoring for this. There is ongoing expert panels that are reviewing this data on a daily basis. It is their job to look at the safety of this vaccine and collect that data and report it eventually to the appropriate institutions. And so we don't know necessarily how long the immunity will last for this or the long-term effects of the vaccine, but we're getting into the phase where we're starting to see some of the long-term effects of getting the disease. And, you know, one of the most commonly cited things is the mortality rate. I think it's a little bit too early to jump the gun when we notice what the ultimate effects of this new disease are going to be. It's really unfortunate to see some of these, you know, college athletes who all of a sudden have severe cardiomyopathy or have the ventricles in their heart become very, very big because of this virus, or could contribute to developing that as a part of this virus. That, you know, the cardiac portions and the pulmonary portions of this disease, we don't know the extent of the injury for some of these. So I would not, you know, people who frequently cite saying that, you know, well, you know, this has like a 0.5% mortality. Why do I need to get this anyway? First off, that's 0.5% mortality in patients who make it to the hospital. And so if we run in a room in a hospital, you know, our chances of having good outcomes become a lot lower. And then we won't know for a while what the impact of this really ramped up inflammatory process has in our body. And so I just want to really kind of stress caution and really just kind of really trying. I don't know I know everyone's heard the pep talk to this point of just trying to stick in there, but you know, I think we're closer to the end of the tunnel than we were yesterday. And I think we continue to make progress, but I don't think we're out of the woods completely yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. I don't have anything else that I want to ask, and I appreciate taking some time, and, you know, I appreciate our staff putting together their questions. If we need to do a follow-up, we will, but I do appreciate you taking some time, and we'll get this out to everybody and see what their reaction is and then follow up with you. So thanks again. Have a great day.
Yep. Thank you, guys. I just want to say I want to thank all of your staff for all the work that they've done. I think it really is a team sport that we're playing right now, and I just want to really encourage everybody to continue to do the great work that they're doing, because it's because of people like you guys that we're making progress. So thanks everybody for what they're doing as well.
All right. Thanks, Clay.
Thanks, guys.